There were not many people who understood just how broad his interests were and how supportive he was of an astonishingly wide range.
Shows a real understanding of the pressures that the Queen was going through, and that the best way he could support her.
Princess Royal, Princess Anne, on the death of her father. Princess Anne has had to say in a statement in the past few minutes, she says, "You know it's going to happen, but you are never really ready."
He had reportedly stopped living with the Queen after retiring from public life at the age of 96.
He spoke his mind, often shocking the public in the process, and Prince Philip will be remembered, at least in part, for his many gaffes.
The Queen's consort would concede in his early 20s that he could be rude and unmannerly.
For decades, Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth showed unwavering support and love for each other. However, after 70 years of marriage, Prince Philip made a shocking decision: he no longer wanted to live with the Queen. This unexpected move left the public wondering what went wrong. Was this decision personal, or was there more to the story? For years, the truth remained a mystery, but in a surprising revelation, Princess Anne, alongside King Charles and Prince Andrew, has finally revealed the real reason behind their father's departure. Princess Anne, the only daughter of Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth, has left people stunned with her revelation. For years, there were various speculations about why Prince Philip chose to leave Buckingham Palace and not live with the Queen in his final years. But now, the truth is finally out. Princess Anne, often called her father's favorite, has shared the real reason behind his decision, and her brothers, Prince Charles and Prince Andrew, have supported her claims. Unlike the formal and distant relationships often seen in royal families, Princess Anne and her father, Prince Philip, shared a close bond. She was known as her father's girl, likely because of their similar traits: outspoken, abrasive, stubborn, strong-willed, and sarcastic, with a sharp sense of humor often at the expense of others. They both had little patience for those who didn't understand things as quickly as they did. But what stood out was their unwavering loyalty. Neither Philip nor Anne could see any wrong in the other. Instead, they playfully criticized each other while maintaining deep respect. Over the years, Princess Anne witnessed what was happening between her parents. While her brothers were often preoccupied with royal duties, Anne knew the truth. She saw firsthand what lay behind the perfect smiles and the image of the perfect royal couple that her parents presented to the world. But that's not all. Prince Philip also confided in his daughter about some of the challenges he faced in his marriage to Queen Elizabeth. To truly understand why Prince Philip chose to move away, we need to go back to the beginning. Even before Princess Anne and her brothers were born, Queen Elizabeth, then Princess Elizabeth, first met Prince Philip, an exiled Greek prince, at a wedding in 1934. He was 13, and she was just 8 years old. However, there was no spark between them until 5 years later. When they met again, Princess Elizabeth was 13, and Philip was 18. The meeting took place at the Britannia Royal Naval College in Dartmouth, Devon, where Elizabeth was visiting with her parents and sister. Due to an outbreak of mumps and chickenpox among the cadets, plans changed, and instead of attending a chapel service, the royal family spent time in the headmaster's house. Philip, who was one of the few cadets not infected, was invited to entertain the young princesses. Eventually, he grew tired of sitting indoors and invited them outside. He began playing croquet, jumping over tennis nets, and showing off his carefree, athletic spirit. This caught Princess Elizabeth's attention, and from that moment, she fell in love. She later claimed she never had eyes for anyone else after that day. Following this encounter, Elizabeth developed a strong teenage crush on Philip. While he was serving with the Royal Navy during the war years, they exchanged letters. Elizabeth even kept a picture of him in her bedroom as a sign of admiration. By 1946, Philip returned from the Pacific Theatre, and their relationship blossomed. In June, he proposed to her on the grounds of Balmoral. In a letter from that year, Philip wrote, "To have been spared in the war and seen victory, to have been given the chance to rest and to readjust myself, to have fallen in love completely and unreservedly, makes all one's personal and even the world's troubles seem small and petty." Despite the proposal, Elizabeth's father, King George VI, was reluctant about their marriage. He feared Elizabeth was too young and might be settling for the first man she met. Perhaps, he thought, she would meet someone else and change her mind about Philip. Because of this, the royal family remained quiet about Philip's intention to marry Elizabeth. Additionally, there was resistance within the royal family. Even though Philip was of royal lineage and a direct descendant of Queen Victoria, making him and Elizabeth third cousins, many saw him as too brusque, too unpolished, too German, too Greek, and too un-English to marry Princess Elizabeth. But Elizabeth was insistent. She had made up her mind about Philip and was determined to marry him. It wasn't until a year later, in July 1947, after Elizabeth's 21st birthday, that their engagement was formally announced. Ahead of his marriage to Elizabeth, Philip had to renounce his Danish and Greek royal titles and become a member of the Church of England. He did this without hesitation because of his love for Elizabeth. Though he had been baptized in the Greek Orthodox Church, the Archbishop of Canterbury formally received Philip into the Church of England on October 3, 1947. He also adopted a new anglicized last name, Mountbatten. On November 20, 1947, Princess Elizabeth married Philip at Westminster Abbey in London. They later went on their honeymoon at the Broadlands in Hampshire, England, the home of Philip's uncle, Earl Mountbatten. But little did Philip know that his life was about to change in ways he never imagined. After the wedding, Philip continued serving in the Navy, rapidly progressing through the ranks. A year later, they had their first son, Charles, followed by their daughter, Anne. Philip's naval career flourished, and he was eventually posted to Malta. Princess Elizabeth travelled to be with him while the children stayed in England. For a short while, they enjoyed a relatively normal life. But soon, everything changed. In 1952, King George VI fell ill and died, just 5 years after Elizabeth and Philip's marriage. Their world turned upside down. Elizabeth, at just 25 years old, was now the Queen, and Philip, at 30, had to adjust to a new reality. They had thought they would have more time to enjoy their lives before Elizabeth ascended the throne, but fate had other plans. Now, Elizabeth was Queen. But Philip, what was he to become? Not a king, but someone who would remain in the shadow of his wife, the Queen of England. Although this had always been known, it would go on to affect their entire relationship. Elizabeth's succession meant Philip had to give up any ambitions he might have had within the Royal Navy. For a man used to commanding ships, suddenly being relegated to a supporting role could not have been easy. And let's not forget, this was the 1950s. At a time when it was extremely rare for a husband to be outranked and controlled by his wife, this was even more challenging for Philip, as his wife was the #1 citizen. This meant duty came first before family. This marked the beginning of a lifelong struggle for Philip, one that would eventually influence his decision to live apart from the Queen in his later years. But how did it happen? Stick around to find out. Elizabeth and Philip were on a safari trip to Kenya when Philip informed her of her father's demise. Elizabeth knew what was expected of her, and they immediately headed back to the UK. Upon their arrival, Elizabeth became Queen Elizabeth II, but Philip's title remained unchanged. He wasn't named King Consort, and instead, he was given the title of Royal Consort. Regardless, Prince Philip showed unwavering support for his wife, leaving his career in the Royal Navy to serve the monarchy. But this was just the first of many changes. Next, they moved from their old residence, Clarence House, to Buckingham Palace. On June 2, 1953, a year after Queen Elizabeth had ascended to the throne, her coronation took place at Westminster Abbey in London. After the Archbishop of Canterbury, Philip was the first to kneel in front of the new monarch, pledging to be her liege man for life. But was he truly able to be this? It was easier said than done for a man to live under a woman's authority, leaving behind his aspirations and dreams to support Queen Elizabeth II. Philip also had to adjust to walking a few steps behind his wife in public instead of beside her. He later revealed that he thought he was going to have a long career in the Navy, but it soon became obvious that there was no hope, and he had to compromise. Philip accepted his new reality and tried to make the best of it. However, early conflicts arose between Elizabeth and Philip after she became queen. One of the most notable disputes happened when Philip's uncle, Louis Dickey Mountbatten, declared, "The House of Mountbatten now reigns in England." This implied that, since Queen Elizabeth was married, her royal children would bear her husband's surname. However, Elizabeth's grandmother, Queen Mary, and Prime Minister Winston Churchill did not agree. They insisted that Queen Elizabeth and her descendants would continue under the House of Windsor, maintaining her father's legacy. Philip was deeply offended by this decision and said he was nothing but a bloody amoeba and the only man in the country who wasn't allowed to pass his name to his children. His words expressed his frustration and struggle to establish his identity within the monarchy and the challenges that lay ahead. When Queen Elizabeth heard her husband's words, she decided to make some changes. Breaking long-standing tradition, in February 1960, she announced that her descendants would bear the surname Mountbatten-Windsor, a combination of her and Prince Philip's surnames. While Elizabeth was the head of the monarchy, Prince Philip took on the role of royal consort, but his role wasn't clearly defined. He once told Giles Brandreth that he was often perceived as a refugee husband. Despite his efforts to make the best of his position, he struggled to carve a meaningful role for himself within an institution centered on his wife, leaving him in the shadows. Prince Philip described his experience as royal consort as one of trial and error. Although he wasn't the first royal consort in history, he faced challenges with no clear precedent to follow. He also admitted that when he asked what was expected of him as royal consort, people had no real answer and simply looked blank. However, one thing was clear to Philip: his first duty was to serve his wife, Queen Elizabeth, in the best way he could. This was in contrast to Philip's dynamic, driven, and outspoken personality, much like his daughter, Princess Anne. But he carried out his role with utter devotion. In his first years, Prince Philip focused on modernizing the monarchy, fearing it could become a museum piece. But this wasn't without struggles, as he faced resistance from the old guard who wanted to maintain tradition. Philip didn't back down with his ideas, and this resulted in significant success. He proposed broadcasting Queen Elizabeth II's coronation on live television, declaring it would be unfit for the ceremony to be presented as if it were a theatrical performance. More than 20 million people tuned into the televised ceremony, proving his foresight. This was the first time that the monarchy had been slightly visible to the public. Philip also became the first royal family member to sit for a television interview. After about a decade, they invited cameras into their homes, offering the opportunity to film a behind-the-scenes documentary. But that's not all. Philip encouraged Elizabeth to end the outdated practice of presenting debutantes at court and introduced informal lunches and garden parties to engage a broader swath of the British public. He took steps to reorganize and renovate the royal estates and sought to make the royal household and the monarchy less rigid, reducing the excessive formality everywhere. Prince Philip had so much time to himself with fewer official duties that he explored his interests, and by the 1980s, he had written 9 books. He also encouraged Elizabeth in 1957 to televise her annual Christmas messages, taught her how to use a teleprompter, and was the first member of the royal family to use a computer, even writing his emails and speeches. Prince Philip was a man of great curiosity. Queen Elizabeth did her best to include Philip in her public speeches, often saying, "My husband and I," which became a national joke. But Philip was not just a figurehead. Despite the challenges the crown brought along, they accommodated them together. In family matters, Elizabeth allowed him to take the lead, but in state matters, he had no real say. However, there were moments when he treated her as an ordinary wife, even in public. For instance, while Prince Philip was driving Elizabeth to Cowdray Park, his excessive speed made the Queen tense and draw in breath at critical moments. Eventually, Prince Philip exploded, saying if she did it again, he would put her out of the car. Although she was the Queen, she composed herself and didn't protest. There were also moments when she asserted her authority, even in front of her staff. Sometimes, she yelled at him to shut up, which often led him to leave the room in frustration. Like any couple, they had their ups and downs. However, One thing was often linked to Prince Philip: infidelity rumours. Speculation arose due to his naturally flirtatious manner, which made him the centre of gossip. His involvement in activities like his Gentleman's Lunch Club and his tours on the Royal Yacht Britannia in the 1950s led to speculation about possible affairs. Over the years, he was linked to multiple women, including a Russian ballerina, an English stage actor, and a writer. None of these alleged affairs were ever confirmed. At one point, the Baltimore Sun published a story claiming that Philip was romantically involved with an unnamed woman he met regularly in a West End apartment. The palace, however, never confirmed the allegations. Prince Philip denied the story, dismissing the idea of a rift between him and the Queen. He also addressed the rumours sarcastically, asking if anyone had ever seen him go anywhere without a police escort accompanying him, implying such affairs would have been impossible. However, royal biographer Sarah Bradford had a different view. In her biography of Elizabeth, she claimed that since the alleged affair in the mid-1950s, Philip had learned to be more discreet, conducting his flirtatiousness in elite circles grand enough to protect him from the paparazzi and the tabloids. Despite all the rumors and speculations, no infidelity was ever confirmed. Instead, what was consistently evident was Philip's devotion to Queen Elizabeth. During their 50th wedding anniversary, Queen Elizabeth described him as her strength and stay throughout the years. A fitting start to the celebrations. On the eve of their golden wedding anniversary, the Queen and Prince Philip attended a banquet hosted by London's Lord Mayor, someone to whom they owed more than they would ever claim or ever know. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip went on to celebrate their diamond and platinum anniversaries, with Elizabeth always expressing gratitude for his unwavering support and love. But in 2017, something happened that led to a major change in their relationship. After over 70 years of marriage, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip decided to live apart. What could have led to this decision? Keep watching to find out. Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth separated in May 2017 when Philip announced his retirement from public life. Finally, that night, Queen Elizabeth's husband, Prince Philip, officially retired after 7 decades in the public eye. However, he didn't retire until August 2, 2017, after attending his final royal engagement with the Royal Marines at age 96. Buckingham Palace released a statement that the Duke of Edinburgh would no longer undertake public engagements, though he might choose to attend certain events alongside the Queen. But this rarely happened as Prince Philip was involved with something else. After his retirement, he moved from Buckingham Palace to Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, a place known as the former home of Prince John, the epileptic youngest son of George V and Queen Mary, who lived there in quiet seclusion with his devoted nurse, Lala Bill, until he died at age 13 in 1919. But why did Prince Philip choose to live here? In a 2011 interview, Prince Philip, then 90, stated that he wanted to enjoy himself. Though he didn't retire until he was 96, this decision had the full approval of the Queen, who knew how supportive Philip had been and that he wanted to have time for himself. However, when Philip arrived at Sandringham, he was horrified to see a busload of cooks, telephonists, and other staff awaiting him, despite his desire for a simple visit. Regardless, Prince Philip made sure his stay was enjoyable. In the privacy of Sandringham, he enjoyed his freedom to go carriage driving, a new hobby he took up after he could no longer play polo due to arthritis in his wrists. Carriage driving became a form of relaxation, though he later had to stop as he could no longer control the horses. He also enjoyed painting watercolors and reading, preferring history to novels, and discussing various topics with friends. Philip also enjoyed driving, but in January 2019, he had to stop after being involved in a car accident. While driving onto a main road near Sandringham, his SUV flipped, but he walked away without serious injury. Though uninjured, the driver and passenger in the other car sustained injuries. Philip apologized, and 3 weeks later, he voluntarily surrendered his driving license. The Duke of Edinburgh was no longer in the driver's seat. Buckingham Palace confirmed that the 97-year-old decided to voluntarily surrender his license. However, he was still allowed to drive around private estates and was seen behind the wheel at Windsor Castle in April 2019. What was meant to be a short visit to Wood Farm turned into a longer stay, as Philip never returned to the palace. He knew that if he did, he would still try to be involved with royal life despite his retirement. Instead, he embraced the peaceful life at Wood Farm Cottage. This arrangement meant that he and the Queen would spend long periods apart. However, they spoke daily on the phone, sharing details about their day, and the Queen, along with other members of the royal family, visited Wood Farm to spend time with him. Despite Prince Philip's retreat from public life, he attended important occasions, including the 2018 royal weddings of Prince Harry, Princess Eugenie, Lady Gabriella Windsor, and Princess Beatrice. However, as time passed, he began to lose many of his longtime friends, one of the burdens of living a long life. Within a year, Philip lost 3 of his closest friends, and more people he had known passed away, including his valet of 40 years. Despite this, Prince Philip remained remarkably fit and agile for his age, though his short-term memory began to fail him as he approached 100. While everyone was excited about his upcoming birthday, Philip was not. He disliked the fuss and attention. Philip also travelled around, usually staying at Windsor during the Easter court and spending weekends at Broadlands with Queen Elizabeth. He enjoyed Balmoral less in his later years, cutting his visits short in 2019 and 2020 before returning to Wood Farm. In 2020, the Queen accompanied him to Sandringham, where Prince Charles visited them, a reversal of roles. However, their visit was usually short, as the Queen had to return to attend to state matters. Then, something unexpected happened that brought Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip back together. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the lockdown was announced in March 2020, and Prince Philip joined Queen Elizabeth at Windsor, entering what was jokingly called HMS Bubble. They stayed in touch with family via Zoom, and on July 22, 2020, Philip made a memorable final public appearance. He stepped into the quadrangle at Windsor Castle to hand over his post as Colonel-in-Chief of the Rifles to the Duchess of Cornwall. This was the last time he appeared before the camera. In January 2021, Philip and Elizabeth were vaccinated against COVID-19 by a household doctor at Windsor Castle. However, in February 2021, he was admitted to King Edward VII Hospital as a precautionary measure after feeling unwell. Though he walked in unaided, the public worried about his well-being. Buckingham Palace confirmed that he was responding to treatment for an infection and later underwent a successful heart procedure before being discharged. Upon returning home, discussions about his forthcoming 100th birthday took center stage, but Philip was not looking forward to it, perhaps because he knew he wouldn't reach it. 3 weeks later, on the morning of April 9, 2021, Prince Philip passed away at the age of 99, with Queen Elizabeth by his bedside. The palace described his passing as a peaceful death, and the Queen later admitted that he had left a huge void in her life. Prince Philip was buried on April 17, 2021, at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, where he was temporarily interred. Alongside 25 other coffins, including that of George III, Prince Philip's final resting place was secured. However, his last will was not read but was sealed for at least 90 years to protect the Queen's dignity and standing. Speculations suggest that it might contain material harmful to the reputation of the royal family. Reflecting on Prince Philip's legacy, Princess Anne described him as her teacher, supporter, and critic. She expressed deep admiration for him and aspired to emulate his example of a life well lived and service freely given. His ability to treat every person as an individual with their own skills was a defining trait throughout his life. She also acknowledged the vital role he played in supporting Queen Elizabeth as she ascended to the throne at such a young age. His unwavering support helped her rule with confidence. Prince Charles also paid tribute to his father, stating that he had given the last 70 years of remarkable devotion to the Queen, the royal family, the country, and the entire Commonwealth. He admired his father's dedication and astonishing energy in supporting his mother throughout his life. Prince Andrew, recalling family moments, spoke of Prince Philip as a father who cherished his time with his family. About a year after Prince Philip's death, Queen Elizabeth spoke of her late husband, saying, "I have spoken before of my deep and abiding affection for this wonderful country and of the many happy memories Prince Philip and I always held of our time here. It is often said that it is the people that make a place, and there are few places where this is truer than in Scotland, as we have seen in recent times. Her words reflected the deep bond she and Philip had with Scotland and how much she missed him. Although Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth spent their final years living apart, he lived a remarkable life, and his unwavering support for his wife was extraordinary. A year after his passing, on September 8, 2022, Queen Elizabeth II died at the age of 96. She was laid to rest beside her beloved husband at King George VI Memorial Chapel. Even in death, they remained together. What do you think of Prince Philip's decision to live away from Queen Elizabeth in the later years of his life? Do you think he had a hidden motive beyond what was revealed? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen, you will enjoy it.